This video is sponsored by Aura. This is a PS1 game called The Book of Watermarks, and it doesn't really look like a PS1 game just going by this front cover, or really a video game at all. Like most box arts will try to pop with color and loud eye-catching design, and The Book of Watermarks is like the anti-box art, with its more muted palette, simple font, and this side profile Renaissance-looking guy. This looks more like something you'd see in a museum rather than in EB games. Sony published this exclusively in Japan back when they used to make weirder stuff like this. I wish they still did. And despite it being Japan only, the game's spoken dialogue is entirely in English. In fact, The Book of Watermarks is fully playable as an English speaker, with Japanese only being used for basic menus and subtitles. The reason this is in English is because it's based on a Shakespearean play, a play that was, of course, written in English, and the play thought to be the final one old William Shakespeare wrote alone, The Tempest. But calling The Book of Watermarks a straight adaptation of The Tempest isn't accurate at all. It's far closer to an adaptation of a somewhat obscure Peter Greenaway movie from 1991 called Prospero's Books, itself being something of an adaptation of The Tempest, but even saying that isn't quite accurate. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of it. The point is, this is a pretty unusual game, and it being in English is the first clue that it's committing to its own certain artistic authenticity. Like, rather than this catering to its Japanese audience or trying to be generally approachable, it's instead more concerned with its English-speaking Shakespearean influences, and the more you play it, the more this artistic dedication rings true. It's also clearly super inspired by Myst, like a lot of adventure games in the 90s were. Japanese adventure games at the time often weren't though, like visual novels and anime aesthetics proved far more popular there, but Myst being what Myst was, it's not a shock that a big publisher greenlit what would have looked to the suits like an attempt to recreate Myst's success in Japan. Production costs were still relatively low back in the 90s. In fact, this was primarily developed by just 3 people over 2 years, so why not try to add it as another feather to the PS1's cap? The Book of Watermarks quietly released in July of 1999, with its developers at its launch event talking a lot about its CGI tech and describing it as a game for adults. They said it's a game that's intelligent and isn't noisy. You can see how they landed on the front cover, and this is far from your conventional PS1 game. It's a weird game, even amongst a weird library, and its attempts to be a bit more artsy and mature, I think, are fascinating. Speaking of books which contain information, your personal information is out there on the internet in places that you don't want it to be. Smooth transition, which is why this video is sponsored by Aura. If you've ever tried Googling your name or your email, it can be super uncomfortable seeing where it comes up. There's these data brokers that sell your personal information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who wants to target you, giving them your email, home address, health records, family info, all sorts of stuff that they really shouldn't have access to. If you sign up to Aura, it shows you which data brokers are handling your info and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf, not only reducing the amount of spam you get, but also helping protect you from hackers who could use your info to get into your social media or bank accounts or access even more sensitive information. Aura does a lot more on top of this to protect you too. It includes a VPN, antivirus software, a password management tool, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and so much more, all in the same app at the one affordable price. You might have 1 or 2 of these tools already, but Aura's got it all in the one place. It's super easy to set up, and it'll protect you 24/7, giving you the peace of mind to keep focusing on living your life. So if you value your privacy, go to aura.com/minimme or click the link in the description to start your 2-week free trial. Thanks to Aura for sponsoring, and on with the video. William Shakespeare. You heard of this guy? Apparently he wrote some plays. Also, I'm sorry if I'm bringing up any high school PTSD here. The Tempest stars a magician named Prospero, who is the rightful Duke of Milan, but his treacherous younger brother usurps him, leading to him escaping with his life and his daughter to a remote island, where he spends the next 12 years in exile before the play takes place. Prospero's treacherous brother passes the island on a ship, and so Prospero, being the angry, exiled magician that he is, conjures up a storm causing a shipwreck where the brother and a handful of other characters wash up on shore on the remote island. Our story plays out with a few different groups of characters navigating the island and its encounters, with Prospero playing a sort of puppet master role, interfering with and manipulating characters because he feels he's been wronged. Romance, comedy, drama, action, revenge, The Tempest has it all. I sound like a quote on the back of a DVD case. It's often argued that the character of Prospero is a stand-in for Shakespeare himself, as in some sense, Prospero controls the events in the play, and the epilogue sees Prospero break the fourth wall and turn to the audience, asking them to set him free with their applause. Sometimes this is read as something of a farewell from Shakespeare, and it runs well along themes throughout the play around the illusion of theatre and the transient nature of art and life itself. "We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded by sleep," is one of the famous quotes from The Tempest. Keep it in the back of your mind for now. And yes, this is still a video about a PS1 game, we'll get there. The only character other than Prospero that I want you to remember is a young man named Ferdinand. Ferdinand washed up from the shipwreck. He's the son of a man who helped Prospero escape to the island, and he's a character that Prospero actually kind of likes. Unusual for him. He even gets him to marry his daughter. Obviously, being a Shakespeare play, there's so much more to The Tempest than what I've said here in this Cliff Notes YouTube video about a retro video game, but if you're after readings on Shakespeare, I have a feeling you'll be able to find them, and chances are whatever you find is far smarter than anything that I'd have to say anyway. Fast forward almost 400 years to 1991, and a British art house director named Peter Greenaway released a film called Prospero's Books, and an art house film this is. I've never seen so many naked people in a single movie. This is an abstract adaptation of The Tempest that absolutely loves 17th century Baroque paintings, and like The Tempest, there's so much to read into here if you're willing to. It's a film that wants you to pause it and mull over its dense visuals, and it's totally unconcerned with trying to present as a conventional film with relatable characters or digestible storylines, instead being more of a Shakespearean stream of consciousness from John Gielgud's Prospero's perspective. John Gielgud was a legendary actor specializing in Shakespearean plays, and here he reads out all the other characters' lines while stages full of naked extras form and move around him. If a theme of The Tempest was the dreamlike nature of life, this film makes it a fever dream. Now I know this is like a ton of information at once about these like old academic texts, but it'll all make sense, it'll all come together, just stay with me here. Early on in The Tempest, the play, Prospero passingly mentions his love of books and his library that he prizes above his dukedom, and so in Prospero's Books, this movie, Prospero often interrupts his lines of the play to describe one of his beloved fantastical books, like the Book of Colors, which has every possible color in it, or an atlas owned by Orpheus, or the Book of Mirrors containing all possible kinds of mirrors. Again, it's all very abstract, it's cerebral and open for interpretation, but for now, just keep in mind this basic concept of an elderly Prospero lovingly and repeatedly describing his magical books. Which leads us to the Book of Watermarks, a game that opens with "We are such stuff as dreams are made on" quoted across the screen. Thanks for remembering, and the FMV that follows sets up the premise through quick written lines fading in and out. Prospero is cast to this remote island and takes 13 tomes of magic with him. This Prospero looks an awful lot like Prospero's Books' Prospero, doesn't he? Like costume and all. One day, the tomes of magic vanish. It's unclear why, just reading what it says, and only one remains, the Book of Watermarks, a registry of every book ever written. It's up to you, Ferdinand, the man who marries Prospero's daughter in The Tempest, to find the remaining tomes and restore Prospero's magic power. Effectively, you're wandering around solving puzzles to find books for this old guy, and it's a lot like Myst. Left and right to look around, up to move to the area in front of you, but unlike the original Myst, where movement was sort of like a slideshow, here we have full motion videos gracefully transitioning us between spots. Turns out the PS1 could handle reflections and advanced lighting after all, you just have to render them on a computer beforehand and play them back as a video. Press the select button to pull up this checkerboard screen which contains your puzzle solving items, and these puzzles are definitely on the easier side. I never had to resort to googling a solution, though I did need to keep a pen and paper by my side, which felt very old-fashioned, and if I was really stuck, I could just walk up and open the in-game Book of Watermarks for a clue, and by clue I mean it'd probably basically tell me the answer straight up. The biggest hurdle that I hit was thinking that I couldn't walk around this room because it wouldn't let me, until I realized that I had to stand in this specific spot and not this specific spot to do so. It's a bit clunky like that. At one point, I saw these symbols on a wall and thought that they had to mean something, so I jotted them down. Then later on, I saw this grid of symbols and noted down where the symbols I saw on the wall were on this grid, and then I saw another same-sized grid with English letters on it, so I transposed the positions of the symbols onto this grid in my notes and used the word it created to solve a puzzle. And a lot of puzzles are like this. They have this sort of puzzle book style, you know? You see a thing and just connect the dots, or you hear a tune in the background and play that tune on this piano, or you figure out a number pattern to fill in the missing numbers. It's only ever a bit overwhelming at the very start when you're sort of scoping out everything, but once you solve the first puzzle, it settles into its straightforward rhythm. That rhythm being, you solve a puzzle, then get an FMV of Prospero describing one of his books directly to you, then solve another puzzle, then get another clip about a book, so on and so forth, where, like Prospero's books, each book is again a bit fantastical, there's lots of overlays and busy editing, and it carries a real abstract what is the meaning of any of this kind of vibe.
Owner of this opus did develop in the 14th century a 14-line poem called The Sonnet.
It's kind of upbeat, right? Like, looking at this game before playing it, I half expected it to be all moody and brooding, but it actually adopts this mostly jovial tone. The music is so cheery, and Prospero is like a campy children's storytime TV host. He's played by the late Jack Donner, an American actor who seemingly had small roles in just about everything, which is why he might look kind of familiar, especially if you're a Trekkie. Outside of these clips, the vibes during gameplay are a lot more low-key, and the sound design is very naturalistic. You hear birds in the background and the water running outside, and inside it's often just dead quiet. There's rarely any music, but it's not creepy. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. It's more like a paradise. It's paradisiacal. I've used that word twice in videos now. It winds up feeling like one of those pop songs with a big chorus, but a very slow and low-key verse. Like, you're lulled into these puzzles and wandering around the island until you beat a puzzle and the chorus kicks in where old man Prospero lovingly tells you about his latest book, and then it's back to the slow verse. It'll only take you a few hours to finish the game, and by far the most abrasive thing about it is how long and slow these walking around videos are. You might have noticed that I've been zipping around the island, and that's not me hitting a skip button in the game or fast forwarding it in editing, that's me fast forwarding it on my PS1 emulator. I'm not sure I could stomach this game on real hardware because these walking clips aren't skippable and some run as long as almost a minute. Think you might need to go press a button on the other side of the island? Have fun spending the next few minutes getting there. There's a charm to each of these videos the first time you see them, like 90s PC games, and the words interactive CD-ROM kept being conjured in my head, but by the second or third time you're watching the exact same clip, let alone the 10th, the charm wears off. Speaking of interactive CD-ROMs, the Book of Watermarks is split across 2 discs because there's over an hour of footage in this game, which might make it the shortest multi-disc PS1 game in terms of playtime. Looking at the manual here, disc 1 contains this half of the map, and disc 2 this half. This manual also contains these detailed descriptions of the different areas in the game, mentioning their architectural influences, their names, their dimensions, and their histories, where none of this information is actually in the game. At the game's launch event, the director Takashi Kobayashi mentioned that he read over 100 books on architecture alone, and somewhere between these overly detailed descriptions in the manual and these long walks in the game that you're forced to watch, and the abstract Prospero clips and the easy puzzles, the Book of Watermarks focuses less on challenging your deductive skills, telling an exciting story, or even being a conventional video game, and more on being atmospheric and artsy and a mood piece. Like, Kobayashi clearly fell into a massive rabbit hole of influences making this game. Just like Prospero's books, it's clear that this wants to be analysed as a work of art, as something deep and academic, and to do so, let's take a look at the ending. Hello, hi, this is a janky edit. Basically, I was going to show you the ending of the Book of Watermarks in its entirety at this point in the video, but when I put it together, it just didn't play very well. You know, it goes for over 2 minutes long, and it's really poorly audio mixed, so you can barely hear what Prospero's saying anyway, and there's a track in it, like a song in it that could get copyrighted, so I figured it probably works better if I just sort of reductively sum up what happens in the ending, and basically, Prospero goes on a big rant. You give him all the books and he tells you, the Book of Watermarks is a book that contains information on every other book ever. And it starts creating, being a magical book, it starts creating books from the books written within it. And then Prospero goes on to call all of his magic tomes monsters spawned by limitless human desire. So he'll bury the books and he'll bury his palaces and temples, and everything in the world shall dissolve and leave not a wreck behind. And then he says, we are such stuff as dreams are made on, and the game ends. And sort of, you see the books fading away and the palaces fading away and everything just fading away. It's really, really abrupt. I was completely lost when I first saw this, so don't be concerned. But I am going to play you a little bit of this ending just so you can hear the song that's playing, because it sounds very paradisiacal. It sounds very Enya-like. And the reason it sounds very Enya-like is it's because it's by Moya Brennan, who is Enya's sister. And it's really quite lovely music. They've done a really fantastic job with the Moya Brennan tracks. There's 3 tracks that Moya Brennan made for this game, and they're all just sort of, they add to the vibes so much, and you'll see what I mean. I'll play them back, and then we can go back to the normal script of this video. Okay, cool, thank you, goodbye.
I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms in the earth, and deeper than ever did plummet sound, I'll drown my book.
So up until this point, Prospero has spent the game simply describing his magical tomes. There's no obvious foreshadowing for this ending, or if there is, it flew over my head. To figure out what's going on here, at least from an artistic intent standpoint, we need the help of the Internet Archive to pull up this page from the Book of Watermarks' now defunct website, a page written by director Takashi Kobayashi that introduces the game and outlines its 3 major literary influences. The Tempest and Prospero's books are here, naturally, alongside another called The Library of Babel, a well-known, very philosophical short story by Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges from 1941. Short story, even shorter, The Library of Babel is about an unnamed narrator who seemingly lives in an infinite library that contains every possible book. Like, literally every possible combination of alphabetic letters are in this library. So most books are pure nonsense, but some may contain some revealing truths. Our narrator struggles with this concept, searches for those truths and for the meaning of this impossible library, and the themes of the book revolve around humanity's futile attempts to try and understand everything when there's so much conflicting information and virtually an infinite amount of things to understand. The Book of Watermarks, in the Book of Watermarks, keeps creating an infinite amount of books, so you could see how that could turn into a Library of Babel situation, and you can draw pertinent parallels to the modern world or the internet and the feelings of despair and meaninglessness from the information overload we all go through if we're indulging in the philosophy here, but again, none of this is properly hinted at or built towards throughout the game, so it feels far more baffling than it does profound. It's an interesting concept to attempt to capture in a PS1 adventure game though, like regardless of how well it pulls this off, and I'd argue that it doesn't pull it off well, I can't help but admire that it tried. Also, it's very fun to chat about these big concepts in a video about such a quaint and obscure PS1 game. I think the far more effective way you can look at this ending is with that Tempest quote in mind. We are such stuff, you know the rest. I've said it a bunch of times now, but remember the full quote ends with, "And our little life is rounded with a sleep." I think this entire game is encapsulated in this quote. The game is clearly going for a dreamlike atmosphere. The music, the vibes, the way you seem to glide instead of walk everywhere, like one of the transitions just has you literally gliding through the air. The way Prospero just appears to tell you things with no indication of where his physical location actually is. The completely impractical way the architecture is designed with long spiraling staircases and strange secret rooms. The abstract nature of the puzzles, like, it's all like a dream, and being a dream, it's transient. At the end, the entire thing just vanishes. The Book of Watermarks is a dream, and once the dream is over, it's gone without a trace. Towards the end of Kobayashi's webpage, he gets all philosophical and ponders a bit on if we as humans are living in a transient dream, before closing with, and I should note that this is Google translated, At the very least, the world of Book of Watermarks built inside the PlayStation is insubstantial. If Prospero in The Tempest is a stand-in for Shakespeare, maybe Prospero in the Book of Watermarks is intended to be a stand-in for Kobayashi, and he's making a comment on how his passion project of a game is going to eventually vanish, or fade into obscurity. Like how Prospero loses his power at the end of The Tempest and relies on the audience to decide his fate, it's the audience that will keep this game alive until it eventually vanishes. And this YouTube video about this game will eventually fade into obscurity too. Call me Prospero because each of my videos are magical tomes. I don't know where I'm going with this train of thought, and I'm not theatrical enough to make it work. So let's step back a bit, because ultimately, I don't think these nuggets of philosophy are particularly well done. It all feels a bit unearned and rushed at the end, but there's a maturity to the Book of Watermarks that I really admire. I appreciate its attempts to drive the medium forward as an art form. Like Prospero's books, it wants to be interpreted, to be analysed, and there's a dedication to that that I think is admirable and easy to appreciate as a part of the broader video game medium. This is pretty unusual stuff for a late 90s console game. Kobayashi's article also hints that you can die in the game, or that there's multiple endings, but I couldn't find any evidence for any of this. I ripped all of the FMVs from the discs just to check if there was anything I missed, and the only thing that I found was this quick black and white behind the scenes clip, which is cool to see. I'll throw it up on my second channel, and if anyone knows how to unlock this clip in the game, I'd love to know, but otherwise, this is a very linear game. I wonder if it was meant to be bigger in scope, because clearly so much thought went into it. In terms of my own enjoyment of the Book of Watermarks, analysing it and learning about its influences was the fun part. I enjoyed attempting to figure out what it's trying to say, but I wouldn't say that I loved my time with it. It didn't nail its concepts, but it's refreshing that it attempted them, and I wouldn't play it outside of an emulator that I could speed up to skip those long FMVs, but overall, it's memorable, it's esoteric, it came out at a transformative time for the medium, and on that thought, there's definitely a charming 90s FMV aesthetic to enjoy here too. It commits to its unusual inspirations in a very pure and aesthetically uncompromising way, and for all its flaws, there's a passion behind the Book of Watermarks that is magnetic. And there we wrap up a video on something that's a little weirder, a little more esoteric. I know I cover weird stuff on this channel often, and I call a lot of stuff weird. This one's pretty weird. This one justifies the weird title. I really wanted to sort of dive into the things that inspired this game as much as I wanted to dive into this game. You know, I wanted to sort of challenge myself. I don't know anything about Shakespeare. I'm not a smart guy. I'm not a literary historian. But playing this game and then going back and seeing what The Tempest is all about and reading The Tempest and watching some of the movie adaptations of The Tempest and sort of delving into all the things that, you know, Takashi Kobayashi seemed to dive into while making this game was a really fun experience for me. A really fun excuse to learn more things. All of my videos are just excuses to dive into different subcultures. So yeah, if you liked this video, subscribe, hit the bell, subscribe to my Patreon and give me free money. You know, do things that help the YouTube algorithm, or if you want to help me more directly, I have a Patreon, and my Patreons are coming up on the screen, and they're the best. Thank you to all of you, and yeah, hope you're all well. Take care of yourselves. Hope you enjoyed the video. Click like. Goodbye.